Kisha Reed is absolutely one of my favorite people I have ever met in early childhood education. We have known each other for a while online. We've been allies and partners in defending play. We've for a long time lived kind of parallel lives, working in our classrooms, but also creating sort of a sense of community and educating others beyond our spheres. I love the way, I am really passionate about incorporating parents into the classroom and engaging parents in play-based education and things we're doing. And Kisha is the master at that. Listen to her stories here. You're going to learn, I think, a great deal about how really effectively one can incorporate parents into your program and the value of it. One of the things she says in this that just blows your mind is that her parents understand what they're doing so well that she says that during the pandemic, parents are sending her documentation of the children's learning. Isn't that remarkable? If every school could have that, we would be able to change the world instantly if parents and educators were on the same page about all this. I think the other thing that she is a master at, and she's a master educator all the way around, but one of the things she is absolutely a master at is what I call observational research. Just really studying the children, figuring out what they're doing, figuring out, where they're going with things, understanding them. It's our job is to be learning right alongside the children, and nobody does that better than Kisha does. One specific thing that just really stood out to me is she uses this phrase. Those of us in the early years, and we talk a lot about Reggio Emilia, and those of you familiar know we talk about, the three teachers, right? There's the adults, there's the other children, and then there's the environment. And I love the way Kisha talks about her environment and how the children over time at her place develop a relationship with the materials and the environment, and which makes them better able to learn from their environment. And we always talk about children, the relationship with other people. They also create a relationship with that third teacher in a way that Kisha has really allowed me to see it. So I think this is a winner. Kisha is especially good for those of you who are in classrooms. But I think everybody should watch this because she's really one of my favorite people. And I think you'll feel the same way when you're done.
Hey, welcome back to the Play First Summit. And I am so excited to introduce you to Kisha Reed, who is the owner and director of Discovery Early Learning Center, a place for childhood. Love the name.
Thank you.
And it's a play-based program located in Maryland. Really cool. And you have been in the early childhood field for more than 27 years.
Yeah, for 27 years. After I said that to Tom, when I got off the phone with him, I said, wait a minute, am I that old? And I counted it back, and sure enough, I'm that old. I've been in the field for 27 years. I wasn't even out of high school yet. And it's just something that I've always been pulled to do. And when I got to high school and realized that there was a class called Child Development, where there were real live children that you can go and learn to work with. Yes, and I took that class all 4 years. 2 of the years I didn't even get credit. But I took that class all 4 years, and it just, that was the beginning of it all. That was when it was solidified in my heart that this is what I wanted to do with my life.
Give me goosebumps, like to find your passion so young. And you even have a group that advocates for play called Play Empowers, which promotes developmentally appropriate play-based education. I mean, so you're not just like someone who loves, we always hear, I love working with children. Yeah. You're like really committed and passionate about play-based education. And to find that seed so young is huge. That's really cool. Love
I think
that.
If I look back even further, I think that seed was born in me as a child. I grew up it's like a cross between the city and the suburbs, just this little apartment complex, right? And we didn't have much, but we had a creek and we had a forest and we had a playground and fields and we had time, children, and permission. And that, the memory of that, the experiences from that live in me so strongly. That is what fuels me. That is when my heart feels the happiest, when I think about that and when I am experiencing that with children. So I think that was like the catalyst for that magneticness that I had in me for working with children.
Yeah. I'm curious. So like you're really bringing up something for me here. When I first started teaching, and I'm an accidental educator, I came into it at 36 years old. And at the time, when I was in that classroom setting it up, I had flashbacks to being 5, and all of those experiences flooded me. And I remember, back in the 60s when I was growing up, I was allowed to roam free in the neighborhood. I mean, just complete, freedom and permission. And I actually went back this last summer to see it. But did you have that same thing when you were in the classroom, feeling your early childhood come back?
Yes. Working, I remember the first day that I found out, I mean, it was like shocking to me that there's a class. Okay, that was exciting. But then there are children there. And I remember the first day walking in, and this was a very play-based program. This was back in the early 90s, and they were still teaching that development, what we know is right for children. So I walked in the room, and it just immediately, it was the smells. There was the smell of Play-Doh. It was the sounds that it just took me. It was like I was zapped right back into my own childhood. And it flooded my heart. And that's when I knew, that along with lots of things in between, there are different children along my journey who specifically have left imprints on my heart and have pushed me further as an educator and made me really, 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 truly believe in play and freedom and respect for young children. And that just stemmed from literally that first day walking in, just smelling those smells. And like you said, it flooded me right back to that childhood, that freedom, running around barefoot through the neighborhood, in the creek. I mean, time didn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. And for me in my practice, when those moments would flood me again with my class, and I knew I was in pure childhood, it's like those sacred moments that come and the children are free and you're free and it's like so glorious to let children have their childhood. It's sacred ground. I know that you have this world-class play-based program, right? In a small New England town. Has it been challenging to, really get parents on board and understand what you're committed to? Or has it, I'm curious how that's gone for you.
Okay. Well, yes, we are in a small town. We're not in New England, but we're in a small town. That's all right. We're in a small town. Okay. And, I, like you, joined teaching, totally accidental. I ended up here in Poolsville, and it was a total just by chance. I don't live here. I never lived here. I did grow up in this county, and I got to a point where I was really fed up with working in programs that were not developmentally appropriate, programs that did not line up with what I knew was right and didn't give me that feeling of, childhood flooding back. So I decided one day that I was just ready to not do that anymore. So I posted on Facebook, hey, look, I'm ready to open my program. I'm looking for a space. If anybody out there knows where one is, let me know. And I had one of my old parents private message me and say, hey, we just added an additional into our home, and we are spending 8 months of the year in California. I want to use our addition. And immediately I was like, yes. So I won't forget the first day I drove out here. It was just country road after country road. And I said, I don't know if I can do this. But when I got to the house and I saw, they had just built it. It was surrounded by windows. Outside had mature trees. It was just space for days. Again, brought me back to that childhood spot. And that's how I started in this town. And I was in that home for 1 year before we grew out of that space to a commercial space. And we've been growing ever since. In fact, we just moved. We're now just moving into another larger facility. And to answer your question, I think when I first moved here, what excited parents was my own excitement. I did a lot of authentic talking with people in the community. just talking about bringing them back to their own childhoods, letting them feel those moments. There are lots of community events, and I was sure to attend as many as I could. And every time I attended an event, I registered a bunch of kids because they could feel the passion. And I think that was what I was missing when I was working in programs where it was very rote, you know, you were almost like a robot, you know, here's your lesson plan for the month that you planned without the children. And that was depleted from me. So when it rose back up, it just was something I couldn't hide. And it was easy. It was easy to fill up. It was easy to get families on board because they, like I said, were taking back to that moment for themselves. Now, another thing that I did to continue that, once I got them in the door,
right? Yeah.
Communication going. Keep welcoming them in. Keep the communication going. Lots of documentation so that they can begin to see what I see in their children when they play. That has been the most important thing that I do, is sharing those moments with the parents, and helping them with the language and with the understanding of what's happening. And then they go out into the community and they're sharing it. They're speaking with the same passion that I speak with. So it's just that ripple effect of bringing people back to that for themselves.
I think you're pointing out something that really is crucial. And I think dialogues with parents is enthusiasm, that unbridled enthusiasm for what we do. It's contagious. You know, I can feel it in your voice. It's contagious. It's like, you know, it brings authority with it because you're giving everything you are to it, right? It's like everything you are and what you believe in, and people hear that rather than coming from a hesitant place. I love that.
I call it taking the mask off, right? Because at the very, very beginning, I think I had to play this role, you know, I am the owner of this school. And it seemed to me, and it continues to seem to me, that when I take that mask off and I'm just authentic and I let the wall down, families are then able to let the wall down. So the difference between being in the more traditional program I talked about versus being in my own program where I consciously made a decision to just be who I am, night and day, because families then felt comfortable. Parents will tour with me, and the next thing you know, we're sitting on the ground, crisscross applesauce, leaning back and having a chat about our personal childhoods versus a very scripted, you know, masculine relationship. And that has carried us through. We're partnering and raising their children, right? So we have to know each other. It's about those relationships. And it's important that we start those authentically. They have to know who we are, as well as
absolutely. And I think when you do that, that trust and mutual respect. I remember when I worked in Head Start, it was really a mandate that every parent you dealt with was your partner, you know, and it was a part of the mission of what I did. I was hired to be that. And, you know, I've spoken to it a million gazillion times because I'm so grateful that in all the jobs after that, I brought that same respect. Like, I didn't care if they hadn't finished high school. I didn't care who, what, you know, I had meth parents at a public school. I treated them with that respect and partnership. And it's stunning what happens when you're just being real with that person and they get to be real back in that mutual. That's beautiful. That is beautiful.
And it's as simple as considering them when you are designing your space, considering them when you're creating your policies, taking them into account, and even sometimes asking them, well, what do you think? Or what is, I know in Head Start you guys visit the homes. Right. And that's not, I've been to homes for different reasons. It's not something that we do as a yearly occurrence. Although every time, for whatever reason that I am visiting the home, I go back to that and say, you know, this is something we really should be doing. Something we really should be doing, because it is a piece of the puzzle of who that child is, right? So
oh my gosh, yes.
I love that. And it is something that I think I want to incorporate. I do remember, I think part of my hesitation, and this, I don't know if this may be going a little deep, but part of my hesitation with that for myself, which I think is warranted, but maybe not, is as a young child, my mother, she didn't sign up for Head Start or whatever the program was at the time because she didn't want a home visit, because she wasn't secure about her home setting, and she didn't want anyone, in her business. So for me, I think I have a little bit of that in my ear saying, well, what do you want me there? And those types of things. So in retrospect, once we know each other, I've been invited for dinner from children telling me to come over, come over for dinner tonight. I had one little girl who we were joking around, and I said, well, I'll come over tonight. And she said, no, don't come over tonight. And then I said, do you have a chimney? And she said, I'll lock the door. I said, well, do you have a chimney? I said, I'll come down the chimney. And she said, no. And I said, do you have a garage? I'll come in the garage. So that night, her mom messaged me and said, why is my daughter holding my hand and taking me around the house looking for you? And I thought she understood we were joking. She genuinely expected me to either be in her fireplace or in her garage. And her mom said, I think after the third night, her mom said, I think you're going to have to come and hide in our garage. You're going to have to come hide in our garage.
I love that. Yeah, and I agree with you. I think, for some parents, for whatever reason, the home is a very personal place. And until there's that trust, I could feel that way as well. And I think that's one thing of really bringing that honor again. And every parent, like every child, is so different.
Yes, and every family. And it's still something that I'm working on, considering that. Because we have, especially us play people, we have a way that we believe, not because we made it up, but because research says it's right for children. And it's those moments where what we know clashes with maybe what is culturally appropriate for a family or which lines up with their family. And it's that relationship with the family that we have to fall back on in order to get over those hurdles. So it's the root of everything. And that's what started me here in this town. I knew by the time I got to that point in my career, I knew that I needed to dig roots and have some relationships. And buy-in, and part of what I did for buy-in, and I didn't even know I was doing it, I'm not going to take credit for this, I just needed junk. So I asked the community for junk, for stuff, for materials. And boy, did they follow through every day. To this for years, almost every day, I would come in and there would be donations. There would be stuff. And people emailed me and messaged me, and I'd be walking through town and they knew who I was, and they would say, hey, Kisha, do you need all these random things. So it was, I think the community felt like, because they engaged and participated in the building of this program, they felt some sense of ownership or some sense of connection to it. And that helped also.
That's huge. That's huge. And what advice would you give to someone opening a play-based center for the first time? Do you have any golden nuggets to share in retrospect?
One of my golden nuggets is going to lean back on what I just said. Get in there with the community. Talk about what you're doing. One of the big things that I did was I shared the process. And again, at the time doing it, I don't know that I had the wisdom to know that was going to be the thing that solidified like who we were in this town. But it was, because people saw the step by step, and I was able to explain the why. Our playground looks like this, and this is why. These are the pieces we're putting in, and this is why, and here's how you can help. So I think that outreach to the community and the using Facebook and using the internet and using social media to really communicate with the community about what you're doing, not even just people with kids, the whole community.
Exactly. That's what I'm hearing, is that it's not just parent buy-in, it's community buy-in, that they feel they're a part of who and what you are and what you're committed to.
And I hear all the time, oh man, I wish you were here when my kids are in high school, or my kids are adults. I wish you were here when they were younger. Or I hear grandparents say, yep, this is what we used to do when we were kids. You don't see that anymore. So you just get that vibe about your program going. There will always be people who are not going to sign up. There's always going to be people who want worksheets, who want homework. That's fine. I was told once by one of my mentors, you can't be everything to everybody, because it was after a tour with a mom who was not a good fit. And I was bummed, because I personally believe every child needs this. Maybe not every family, it might not work for every family, or it might not be what every adult is looking for their child, but I believe every child needs an authentic play-based program. So when I come into situations where it's just not a fit and the family doesn't sign up, I used to get pretty bummed. And until my mentor said, look, you can't be everything to everybody. And it's true, we're not going to be the fit for everyone, but it's my mission to make everyone realize that I'm a fit for their child. This place is right for all children.
Well, yeah, because it is what every child needs, truly.
Yeah, and it's because it is scripted and developed and molded around each individual child, right? So you can get what you need, regardless of what that is, every child. I did a parent meeting because we moved to a new space. So I had this big parent meeting. That's another thing. Call them in, bring them in. Had this big parent meeting, and it was just to talk about who we are, what we do, and why we do it. And a question that I get often is, well, my one child would be great because that child is just wild and, they love to be free. But my other child really likes to read and write. And I had to explain every child, the child who likes to swing quietly by themselves gets what they need. The child who likes to read books all day gets what they need. And the child that likes to rip and run through the water puddles and get muddy gets what they need. So it's not a one type of child deal. It is all children.
Right, which is the magnificence of it. Right. The worksheet world is a one size fits all scenario. Play-based, definitely. I love that. And you are in your classroom, correct? And you still teach.
Yep, I still teach. I still work with children. In fact, I would give up the other side. If anyone wants to take over, let me know.
Yes.
My passion is working with young children. I find that I do like the aspect of working with families as well. I do like, I like taking this vision and making it a reality. So that aspect of it I love. But if I wasn't working in the classroom, then I wouldn't do this. This is.
I love that. I love that because it says so much about how you have not let go of what's most important to you. From that moment that you realize that's where you belong, it's still where you belong. It gives me goosebumps. It gives me goosebumps. It's just beautiful. So I'm curious, have you talked to the parents about coming back, and what have your conversations been around COVID, and are they nervous, and how are you navigating that with the families?
Yeah. So when we first closed, first I was in big time denial. When we first got the news and they said, okay, we're closing for 2 weeks. First it was like, 2-week vacation. That's going to be, a little rest. And I genuinely thought it was going to be 2 weeks. And I wasn't even planning on closing. I was thinking, we're in this small town. We have our own little bubble. We'll just, hunker down. It's before I understood what COVID really was. And my parents made the choice to flatten the curve. So we all decided, okay, we're going to flatten the curve. We're going to be out for 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks turned into, I think, what is now going on 4 months. Yeah. In that time, I have trusted my parents. I know that they have seen what play is about, and they have genuinely engaged with me, some of them for 8 years on their 3rd or 4th child here. And I trusted them, and I gave them a challenge. We talked about being strong through this, because everyone knows it's a financial hardship to just shut your doors for this long. So I created a hashtag, Discovery Strong. And my real goal behind that was to empower the parents to share what they're doing with their own children. And I didn't feel like I needed to meddle in that. I didn't need to teach them what I know, because they've been a part of it this whole time. So lo and behold, guess who learned something? Me. They have done so many amazing things. For example, one of my families, their son just was missing the playhouse at school. It's his favorite thing. He told his dad, I just miss climbing on the roof. And next thing I know, I'm getting pictures of the dad. He and his son are building a playhouse in the backyard. And and he's like, all right, we came over and we looked at the playhouse. We went back home. They're piecing it together. He's actually creating this with his dad. And then the whole next day he's painting it. And you can see the documentation. My parents are documenting and writing down what they're seeing and what their child is saying, just in the way that we do. So the tables have turned. It's amazing. The tables have turned. So that giving the parents that trust has taught me, it reinforced the idea of continuing to do that, continuing to have that line of communication. And it's not one way, right? It's back and forth. So I don't know. I know it's hard. My parents are still working. They're working from home and they have their children and they wish that we were open right now. And I wish that we were open right now. But there's so much value in the time that they have right now with their family. And they're fishing and they've never fished before. One of my kids rides her bike past the school twice a day, every day. She reads it on the bench out there. She knocks on the window if she sees me in here. It's just been tough, but also magical and amazing for them to experience it at home. What have I talked to them about? We are now starting the dialogue of, okay, it's time to start thinking about returning. We've moved to a new space and we're opening next month and they're nervous. I don't think they're all going to come back right away. We're really looking at the numbers and it's just a dialogue. I want to continue with putting the children first, right? So we're going to do whatever we can do to make this the safest place for the children possible, which is hard for us because one of the new rules is parents can't come in.
Right. And oh my gosh.
Discovery, parents come in. They come in. They read books to kids. So we're going to be opening outside and spending most of our time outside, which we do anyway, but it will just be just really, really intentional, spending our time outside. The hardest part, I think, is going to be not having parents within the space that the children are in. That's what I'm dreading the most.
Yeah, and I love your solution. Really, the healthiest place for children, if at all possible, is outside.
Yep.
Right. And I think it's going to make that transitional period so much easier. I love that.
Yep.
And that brings to mind, you have a remarkable playground and you allow, like you were saying earlier, the child was missing walking on the roof of the playhouse. We're talking risky play here. Tell me about that. How do you get parents to agree to the risky play? I mean, here the father's actually building one for his son. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. How do you, you're creating magic with parents. You know,
I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it starts from those relationships. They have that relationship with me. And so then there's that trust there. They trust me and they know in their heart that I have their child's best interest at heart. They don't question. So knowing that, right, and trusting me, and on top of that, I have the language. I have the research. I have the facts. And because I'm welcoming them in, they're able to see it live. Before they see it live, though, they see documentation, right? It's so much easier to see a photo of your child in a high place, right?
Right.
And read about what he did up there and how wonderful it was for him and the things that he said when he was up there, and then come and pick him up and he's still in one piece, right? If that happens enough times, you begin to get a little bit looser. And then you see videos. You see videos and you may, parents may clutch a little bit, but then they pick up their child and they're still in one piece. So when they're in the environment with us, after they've gone through those experiences and they're in the environment with us and they're seeing it with their children, I stand there with them and I say, look at that, because they can watch their child self-assess. They can see their child make choices about where to place their foot when they're climbing up some rocks or climbing up the side of the house or intentionally grabbing in certain areas. And we talk about that. And we talk, and if it makes us nervous, we talk about that. it's not, there's no wrong way to feel about it, right? And I think parents feel comfortable expressing if it makes them nervous, but they also realize that it makes them nervous, but it's good for their kids. So we're going to sit in our nerves and we're going to trust our kids.
Love that. Love that. And I'm curious, what would you say every playground had to have for like the play, creative play, the risk taking? What are the essentials?
What do they have to have? They're going to be loose parts. They're going to have loose parts, but outside, I would say large loose parts. Some of the essentials, I don't know if it's like specific things, but they're traits, like things that are movable. Things that I think it's important to have things that take more than one child to move them. So we have a couple ladders on our playground that are cumbersome, they're big, and they're heavy. So if you want to move it, you need to go call a gang of kids to come help you move it. You have to negotiate who's going to hold what where and how you're going to get around things. I think that's very important to have that. Water, 100%, you got to have water. Sand or dirt or some type of earth that you can move, that they can transport, and materials that they can build with, something that they can create their environment with. So I think the most collaboration inducing play that we have going on is the type of play where they are having an original thought. They have an idea. It's in their head. The only way that they can do this grand idea is if they communicate that to their friends, right? So they're communicating, and that's when new ideas come in, or when they have to explain it in different ways. And that's the type of play that Loose Parts gives birth to. So loose parts, big loose parts, things that they have to carry, things that they can build something new with, a habitat or an obstacle course or those types of things. So it's not one specific thing for me, but it's those traits are important.
I love that. And I love obstacle courses as well. You demonstrated a few times to the children and you never have to show them again. They're constantly creating it. Like, we're going to go on a jungle hunt, you can create anything out of it, right? Like, it becomes this incredible thing.
That thing where they challenge themselves just to the brink of their capability. They just challenge themselves right there. And I watched them do it. And I had a child. It's interesting because to me, I've noticed a pattern, and I don't know if I'm just making this up or if it's a real pattern. But towards the end of the school year, when my kids are getting ready to graduate to kindergarten, I always feel like they have this project or something big that happens or that they go through, and it's individual. This particular one child who had been with me since he was under 2 and had siblings with me ahead of him and behind him, he took some, we have these modular, and I would say I love these modular shelf units. These pieces of shelf, they used to be used as shelves. We didn't need them anymore, so we just put them outside. They're the plastic pieces where they have the legs that you can screw in and create a shelf. Well, this randomly one day, this child decided that he was going to build up with pieces. And he was building up, and I walked over. It was getting pretty high. And I said, "Hey, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm going to build this up, and I'm going to put my chair up there, and I'm going to sit up there." And I was like, it was one of those moments where I was like, oh. And honestly, I didn't think he could do it. I wasn't going to dare stop him, but I almost bit a hole in my tongue. So I said, okay. And I knew this was something I needed to record. So I turned on my camera and I stood far enough away that he felt independent, but close enough that if I had to catch him. And sure enough, he took those pieces and he built that structure, and he knew the right ones to fit in the other ones, and he had to go get, it was that relationship with the materials he had. He'd built smaller structures a million times, so he felt that confidence. He's worked his way up to this challenge. He built it. He got his chair up there. He built another structure next to it to get up high enough. He climbed up there, balanced his body, and he tested it and made sure and sat up there. And when he got up there, he said, I mean, I can't even. This was like one of those moments. Got there, he smiled and he had a little hat on. He's like, "Look at me! Look at me! Hey, down there! Hey, look at me!" And he was so proud. And I cried. I cried. And his mom cried. And we all cried. So those are the moments that having that. I mean, he worked his way up to that confidence over the 3 years that he was here. And you don't get that.
Goosebumps.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Like, think about it, you know, like, do you want your child to have that experience in early childhood, or do you want them sitting still in a chair being told how to hold a paper and a pencil? Like, how is that building confidence?
Exactly.
You know, and it's like,
at the same time, and I think parents are so worried about he won't learn. But if you really watched what he was doing, there was so much math in there. There was so much science in there. There was so much self-pride and self-image and trust. And I mean, those are things that you can't get outside of actively doing things, like actively playing. You can't get that level of self-esteem and self-image, that positive self-image in any other way in childhood than just exploring and playing and getting to know yourself through actions.
He had an idea built up over time that then executed on something that even you were afraid was not possible. Yeah. And he proved it was possible. You know, like you said, you kept back and let him explore that. And what a huge thing. I mean, I can't imagine at 4 years old having an idea like that was a little risky and fulfilling on it.
And it was my job to scan the area. Okay, if he fell, what would that look like? Okay, let me move this, let me move that, let me move that. Well, and sometimes it wouldn't hurt to say, oh, so you're going to climb up there. All right, let's look at this. Make sure that, sometimes it won't hurt. In that moment, he was on a mission. It would have popped his bubble. And there was what was there? It was something there. I think it was a metal wagon that was next to him that he had dragged some of the stuff over with. And I just saw it and I said, oh, let me just move this out of his way. And that's our job, to make it not a hazard, to make it a safe risk. And sometimes it's an imagined risk, but we clear the hazards.
Right, exactly. And that's part of what we do. We scan and make sure that, if there is something that we can facilitate in safety. I love that. So I want to go back to this collaboration, because I do think it's interesting that in the process of free play, children began to, that whole research on games and stuff, you see that in collaboration where they're negotiating. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it feels like that part is almost the part they love the most. Yeah, hey, I got this. I know. Well, what about this? And they're like just all going for it, right?
Sometimes that is the play. A lot of times that is the play. So
yeah, totally.
So it's the figuring out who's doing what and just sharing those ideas. And they get this big, like, it's almost like then it erupts. And sometimes they don't even get to play the game, but they're so fulfilled and that their voice was heard and that they figured it out. So one of the things that, a side note, I observed that boys listen to each other a lot more than girls.
Interesting,
I don't know if that's factual, but
for
the last few years, I was trying to get my mind around different conflict situations. And I was noticing in negotiating and communicating, my girls, over the last 3 years, it hasn't been that long of a research study, but my girls are, they've got so many ideas and they want you to hear it and they want you to hear it and they want you to hear it. So they're outputting, whereas my boys are doing a little bit more of a ping pong. They're outputting and inputting. So what I find even more fascinating is when the boys and the girls are playing together, how this dynamic, it's been great. And I think that in a lot of traditional programs that I've worked in the past, it's very gender segregated, right? The girls play in the kitchen, the boys play in the blocks. It's not like that here. And what I've found is that when the kids are playing in those mixed genders, it's stretching them both, right? The girls are being forced to listen because the boys are used to that. They are like, I have an idea too. and they're all forced to collaborate in a different way. So I think it's important that when we're structuring our programs and when we're working with children, we're not giving off vibes or unconscious language that the girls play here and the boys play there. Instead, just let children with like interests get together and play.
I agree.
Yeah,
Huge.
It's a wonderful collaboration from the birth of an idea to see how it can go from, and it's just seeing something, just seeing a loose part and one child getting a spark and watching that spark grow and grow and grow into this huge, fire of idea is amazing.
And that's where I feel like, the housekeeping area, for me, it worked better when I had it more loose parts based or pieces. And I, of course, being a Waldorf trained teacher, I had the, play stands where they went under. But in that way, then the narrative could be anything. It wasn't so stuck to this pre-made furniture.
Yes.
Rather, it was this movable thing.
Mm-hmm. Movable, literally movable. My children literally move furniture. They literally create the environment that they need, and that's inside and outside. And that's something that I remember the first time that happened on a large scale, where they were like, one of my kids was moving a shelf. Like, he moved the kitchen, the entire dramatic play area outside of the dramatic play area across the room. And I just watched and I was like, it's very interesting. What is going on? And we left it there and they played differently when it was moved. It became something totally different. And in observing him, I think he just needed to do some heavy work. I think he was anxious about going to kindergarten, and he was very, agitated and needed to just move something. And he knew he was in an environment where his need would be respected, even if it was questionable and we were like, what's going on? It's the idea of observing first before you jump in and correct, and kind of getting an idea, getting a better knowing of what is their plan, what are they thinking, and just watching him move that stuff and create new play and just spark something new for him was magical. And again, it encouraged other children to say, oh, what is he doing? Let me come over there. And they created a brand new play that we had never seen before.
I love that. And I also think you're bringing up something really crucial, that we know children do need heavy things to lift, that there's so many benefits in their nervous system by lifting heavy things, so many things in their emotional states. Can you speak a little bit more to what you've seen in providing that for children?
Mm-hmm. I think it's important to provide that. And I think it's important I think sometimes we'll have an environment void of that. And then we'll see an issue and then we'll say, oh, I'll bring in these heavy jugs. I think if you already have an environment that supports that need, and you have an environment that a child is aware and clearly understands that they can seek out and meet their needs, you don't have to get to the point where the behavior is destructive before you decide, I can help them by providing in the jugs. Pre-think that and have those materials in your room. Some of the heavy things that we have, I always go back to the ladders because those are the most cumbersome, big, heavy things we have. But we also have some weighted pillows, and those are just our pillows, but they happen to be weighted. We also have lots and lots of 5-gallon water jugs. We have sensory bottles in our toddler room that are just big enough for them to lift up and carry, but heavy for them. We have wood chunks, like smaller stumps that have some weight to them. We have pots and pans that are heavy to lift. We have wagons that the kids can pull each other back and forth with. So I think that if you have those things in your environment, it's kind of a cycle that they're getting it before they're depleted of it, right? They're getting it before they need it.
Love that. The other thing that I'm curious about, just listening to you talk and how much you honor the children's needs within their play, which is like goosebumps. Like, I wish I was talking to every teacher in every room across the globe, having this conversation of this is what we do. How is it for the children who come to you who've never had this before, are they like, I'm curious, like for some children, is it like, are you for real?
Yes, we're crazy at first. I have a story of two twins that started, and they were in a traditional program before they came, and they came, and now I won't forget. It must have been their first day or close to their first day, and we were painting. The kids were painting, and Discovery kids don't just paint a piece of paper. They make potions. They paint their arms. They're whimsically painting big things, and roller painting. And these two twins just looked at each other, and then they looked at the paper, and they looked at each other, and they looked at the child, and they just didn't say much, but they were just, and they would say, Can I paint with that? And it took weeks for them to believe that they can explore. But the funny thing is, they became the most outgoing, artistic, creative, painting their body children. It was just that they needed to be allowed to do it. So yes, sometimes it takes children a lot of time before they trust in themselves that it's okay, because they've been programmed to not listen to those instincts within themselves, right? So yeah. I'm sure it's a little bit of a fight for some children, but then other children come in and you open the door and they're just like, freedom! And they just get in and go. So it's just, you just never know.
Yeah, no, but what a gift, and I can so see a child who'd been in a confined, you have to ask permission space, to a space where you have permission to fulfill what you need to fulfill. Is, because I experienced that myself. Kids, remember the first time in one of my classes that a child decided to be like, Jackson Pollock throwing paint, and everyone looking like, is Mrs. Hoy going to go get him? And I'm like, that's really cool,
yeah.
What, but like, for, it's wonderful to facilitate that. And, having been in the field for so long, sometimes you see the children grow up and those qualities manifest as adults. And it's extraordinary to think I was part of the permission of that.
That trust in themselves. I think that's one of the things, because I went back and asked my parents. The cool thing is that I'm in a small town, small enough that I have access to all the children that I've had over these 8 years, right? So I can see them. Some of them are, I don't know, my oldest I think is in 7th grade maybe now. I don't know. I can't calculate the years, but I can see them around town, and I put out a survey or questionnaire because I wanted to know, what do they remember? Like, what stands out to them? And I asked the parents, why did they choose Discovery? Would they do it again? Those type of questions. And I read, this was a different set of twins, these two brothers. I read their responses in full-blown, ugly cry tears. Oh. Because it was so beautiful. One of them said, he remembered the time that a boat just appeared on the playground. And he retold the story I told about the boat. I didn't even remember the story, because literally we just came in and a boat appeared on the playground. Right. And they wanted to know where it came from. So I made up a crazy story about pirates and all these things, and they were like totally into it. And he remembered it almost, it seemed word for word. And that stuck with him. Another child said, his brother said, something about remembering the smells of the Play-Doh, and I think it's important that we do ask those questions, that we go back and because it gives me, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Not ammo, but like the tools, the tools to know what really is important in our work. Like, what do we spend our time on? And their memories help me realize what's important, what sticks out, what sticks with them in their heart, and kind of follows them later.
That is huge. That is huge. If you went back to your students later on and say, what is it that you remember? That tells you a lot about what's important in the classroom. Before we close up this conversation, I cannot go a step further without asking you about you talk about thinking toys.
Mm-hmm.
What is a thinking toy? And why are they so important?
Why are they so important? Okay, so a thinking toy to me is a toy that isn't going to do anything unless you do something to it. It's just sitting there. It's a loose part. It is not going to do anything. It doesn't have a button that you push that makes a noise. It doesn't, it doesn't rev up when you do anything to it. It literally needs you to think. It needs you to see it and have an idea. It needs your original thought to say, this is going to do this. Those are thinking toys. And I have seen children take the same material, the same loose part, the same thinking toy, and use it in 100 ways over and over again. And it's the magic of it is it could be the same material and the same child from 12 months old to 5, 6, 7 years old. And just to watch that relationship that they have with the material grow and change. You can't do that with something that you push a button and it does one thing. You can't do that. It doesn't make you think. It may impart on you information or it may entertain you, but it doesn't force you to think and create.
I love that. I love that so much. Yeah, because I always, thought for myself, who's doing the thinking, the toy or the child? The toy can't, the child's passive, right? And think of the little manipulatives you can buy. And when I taught kindergarten, the school had bought every kind possible, and how once they figure out how to do the gears, that's all the gears do.
Yep.
It's like. And so what are they going to do with it? Well, let's see what it's like when I bonk it on Billy's head. It's like, no wonder there's a behavior issue.
Yeah.
So, I love that. I think that it's just so poignant to look at loose parts and materials that the child is asked to do the thinking.
Yep. The child has to be the active one. The toy is not the active one.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this conversation has been so rich. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh my word. Yeah, I think I could continue to ask you so many questions, but the last thing before we close down, I want to know a little bit more. Like, you're a play activist, right? You founded Play Empowers. Can you tell me, from that activist perspective, moving forward into our new normal, what would you speak, all the people listening to you now, what words of wisdom or what is there for you to share with us?
I personally think that now is our opportunity. Now is our opportunity to seize the play movement. Because parents are at home and they're seeing what happens to their children when they are deprived of play. But more so, they're getting a front row seat of what it looks like to have an academic schooling that is mundane and rote and feels pointless. This is the feedback I'm getting from families. And they are now front row seat to that, right? And because school may not open in the fall, traditional school, and if it does, it's going to be a lot of outdoors because it may not open in the fall. I feel like this is the opportunity for us play people to say, we have an opportunity here. Bring those children to us. We can provide them a playful environment. We can provide them play-based learning. I am hoping to have school agers here this fall. I know several other programs are going to have school agers there. And I know people who are opening up school age 4 schools. Seize this moment to show families what education really could and should look like while we have the opportunity. That's what I think we could use as new normal. On top of the fact that if school is open, they're going to have to be outside, right? So what does that look like? What does outside learning look like? What should it look like? It is our opportunity to be a little bit louder about what is right for children. Smaller groups are going to happen. We've been wanting smaller groups for, we have these crowded classrooms. I think if we try to find some silver lining in COVID, it could be that possibly we'll have smaller classrooms. Possibly children will be outside more, and possibly families will not have a million things scheduled after school because everything's closed. So
Right, exactly.
we're forced to spend time together as families and out in nature because that's our option.
Beautiful.
And I think we should seize this time.
And do you have a place we can send people for your group, Play Empowers?
I have two Play Empowers. There's a public Play Empowers, and then there is the organization itself, which is a private Play Empowers. If they want to reach us, they can go to Play Empowers, Sharing the Power of Play on Facebook, and from there they can be invited to the smaller group.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. This has just been, as I knew it would be, amazing.
It was really nice talking to you.